Chapter 17. Shonda. Shonda breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Dante shout excitedly, "There he is!" Deacon had texted her to let her know he'd run into trouble, but she had been unable to fully relax until she knew he was safe. And poor Dante had been sitting next to the window all afternoon waiting for Deacon to return. As soon as the front door opened, Dante raced over to Deacon. "Mr. Deacon, what took so long? Did you get our stuff?"
"I did, and I'm sorry it took me so long."
"Everything all right?" Shonda asked, stepping forward.
"Mostly. We can talk about it later," Deacon said. "For now, I could use some help with the bags."
"I'll help too," Dante said, pulling his shoulder back and puffing out his little chest.
"Of course. The man of the house always helps," Deacon said, smiling down at him.
Dante grinned and then turned to Shonda. "Did you hear that, Mom? I'm the man of the house." "Well, Mr. Deacon is the man of this particular house, but yes, you are becoming quite the little man." She followed them outside to Deacon's truck and helped bring in the bags. "Can we go throw the football now?" Dante asked when they'd brought all the bags in.
"In a minute. I need to talk to your mom for just a second."
"Okay, I'll go outside and warm up." Dante grabbed the football and raced outside. "Well, I'm certainly happy to see him wanting to play outside more than wanting to be on his computer game," Shonda said, as she watched him throw the ball and then run after it.
"Me too. Look, someone shot at us at the meetup site. I don't think Eric or Tim, the guy he sent to meet me, tipped them off, so I'm pretty sure Eric's office is bugged. I don't know what you want to do with the rest of your things, but I'm afraid Fire Beach needs to be your home for a while."
Shonda sighed and stepped closer to him. "I suspected as much, and while I love being close to you, and especially giving Dante more time with you, I don't think I should stay here long term. I'll start looking for a job, but do you think you can put up with us until I make enough to move out?" Deacon grabbed her hands and squeezed them.
"You are welcome to stay as long as you like. You're family, and I promise that no matter how long you stay, we won't cross any boundaries unless we've exchanged vows."
She looked up at him, wanting to ask if he saw that in the future. It was too soon right now, she knew that. But if it was on his mind, she would wait for as long as it took. Still, it didn't seem right to ask at the moment, so she just smiled and nodded.
"I'll go toss the ball with Dante for a bit, but then I'd like to take you to the firehouse to meet everyone, and then to the hospital to see if they have any openings. Would you be willing to do that?"
"Of course, and thank you, Deacon, for everything." He smiled, checked the backyard to make sure Dante couldn't see, and then pulled her in for a quick kiss that left her wanting more. She watched him walk outside and then turned to unloading the bags they'd brought in. It was odd that she didn't have much here, and yet she didn't find herself missing anything. With the bags unpacked, she headed outside to watch them toss the football around. She'd worried that Dante would be mad at her for not telling him about Deacon sooner, or that he'd be distant from his father, but he'd accepted him immediately. Evidently, he'd been more starved for fatherly attention than she'd even known. But she was glad that he had Deacon now. As much as his life was in upheaval right now, having Deacon around seemed to balance some of that, so that his smile never faltered. She just hoped it would last if they had to stay here for good.
"Okay, let's take a break," Deacon said, as they walked toward her. "I want to show you guys the firehouse and introduce you to my other family."
Dante's eyes grew wide. "Will I get to see the fire truck?"
"Up close and personal, buddy."
"Oh, right. Will I get to ride in it?"
"We'll see."
Dante continued to fire questions the whole ride to the fire station, but Deacon never looked annoyed or frustrated. In fact, it was a look of pride that shone from his countenance every time Shonda glanced at him. It faltered only slightly when he pulled into the parking lot of the fire station. You okay? She whispered.
Yeah, I just haven't told anyone about Dante yet. We'll probably get some strange looks.
We can wait if you're not ready.
Deacon shook his head. No way. I'm proud to be a dad. Just wanted to warn you in case anyone asks.
Can we go now? Dante asked, looking from Deacon to Shonda.
Deacon chuckled. Yeah, let's go, little man.
They entered the firehouse with Dante in between them, his eyes widening as soon as they stepped into the open bay. Wow, you get to ride in these?
Sure do. Sometimes I even get to drive them.
Whoa! Suddenly, a man appeared from around the truck. He was thick and muscular, just like Deacon.
Deacon, is that you? When did you get back, man? Hey, Luca, just yesterday, I brought back some friends and wanted to introduce them to everyone, as they might be around for a while.
Luca lifted an eyebrow as he glanced at Shonda and Dante.
Oh, yeah? Yep, this is Shonda and her son Dante.
I'm your son too, Mr. Deacon, Dante piped up.
Yes, you are. Long story, Deacon said to Luca, before he could ask any questions. Well, I'm happy to meet you both. Would you like a tour?
You bet we would,
Dante shouted. Come on, then, Luca said with a smile as he led the way.
Shonda and Deacon stayed a little behind, stopping every time someone new appeared so that she could be introduced. Everyone seemed nice, though Shonda had no idea how she would be able to remember everyone's names. When can we come back? Dante asked, when they were finally able to drag him out an hour later. Deacon chuckled as they climbed into the truck.
Soon, I promise. First, we need to stop by the hospital and see if we can get your mom a job.
Dante turned to look up at her. If you get a job, does that mean we're staying here? Would you like that? Dante scrunched his face for a minute as he thought. I'd miss a few of my friends, but I'd miss my dad more if we moved back. So, yeah, I think I'd like to stay. Well, then let's go see what we can do about that, Shonda said with a smile. Deacon pulled into the parking lot of the hospital a few minutes later. It was an older brick building, built in the early 1960s, but still full of life, towering and imposing against the sky. She had never been there before, and the sight of it filled her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Deacon squeezed her hand reassuringly, and they stepped onto the wide cobblestone path that led to the entrance. The walkway was lined with cobalt blue planters, full of carefully tended flowers, their bright petals almost glowing in the late summer sun. Beyond the planters, marble pillars framed the entrance, the ornate carvings of medicine, science, and discovery adorning their sides. Shonda felt a thrill as they approached the double doors, pushing them open and entering the main lobby. The room was brightly lit, with large windows and cream-colored marble floors. There were clusters of chairs, couches, and tables scattered throughout, and 2 elevators in the corner. The air was heavy with the bustle of activity and the muted voices of doctors and nurses discussing patient care. Whoa, this place is cool too, Dante said as he took in the area. Deacon led the way through the lobby. As they walked, Shonda felt her apprehension begin to fade in the face of the hospital's inviting atmosphere. This was a place of healing and hope, and suddenly she could sense its power to make people feel better, to give them a second chance. Deacon stopped at the entrance to the cafeteria and gestured for them to go in ahead of him. What are we doing here?
Well, if you're thinking about working here, you'll probably have to eat here on occasion. I thought we should test out the food to make sure it's edible. Plus, I'm just hungry.
Me too, Dante piped up. Shonda hesitated for a moment, taking in the sight of the long cafeteria tables and the bright orange walls adorned with posters about nutrition and healthy foods. Then she stepped in and immediately felt at home. The cafeteria was bustling with activity, filled with doctors, nurses, and other hospital staff chatting and eating their lunch. A few of them glanced up as she and Deacon entered, but for the most part, everyone seemed too busy to pay much attention. Deacon led them to a table near the window, and they sat down. He pushed a menu towards her and she opened it, her eyes widening at the array of delicious food. There were cereals, muffins, sandwiches, salads, steaks and chicken dishes, even desserts. Everything looked fresh and inviting, and Shonda couldn't help but smile as she read the descriptions. "This is the cafeteria food?"
Hey, we don't skimp on taste in Fire Beach.
"I guess not." "Can I have a pizza, Mom?" Dante asked, looking up from his menu. "Sure, hun. I think I'll try the soup and sandwich option." Deacon placed the order, and soon the scrumptious food was in front of them. Shonda's food was simple but delicious, and she felt a sense of comfort as they ate. It felt good to be in this place, surrounded by people who were dedicated to making a difference. As the meal went on, she could feel her apprehension melting away, and the hospital began to feel like a second home. "This is pretty good, Mom. If you get a job here, can you bring home leftovers?" Dante asked around a mouthful of pizza. "I wouldn't be working in the kitchen, and don't talk with your mouth full," she said, shaking her head. "Sorry, but it's really good." Shonda knew it wasn't a done deal yet, but as she looked around the room, she could see herself working here.
"You ready to continue the tour?" Deacon asked when their food was gone.
"I guess so. I'd love to see the pediatric ward if they'll let us."
"I'm not sure I know any doctors who work there, but maybe Brody or Nick could take you there if they're on today."
He led the way out of the cafeteria, and while he didn't physically touch her, she could feel his presence next to her, comforting and reassuring. Shonda was struck by the beauty and energy of the place. She noticed the little details from the colorful murals on the walls to the cheerful music that played softly in the background. Everywhere she looked, there was evidence of healing and compassion. Deacon led them into the ER, but of course, a nurse at the desk stopped them.
"Can you tell me if Dr. Kavanaugh or Dr. Pearson are here?" Deacon asked,
smiling at the woman. "Dr. Kavanaugh is, but this is the ER. He doesn't take appointments."
"I know. My name is Deacon Jackson. I'm a firefighter. Can you just ask him if he has time to step out and give us 5 minutes?
"I'll see, but I can't promise anything. It has been slow, though, so maybe you'll be in luck."
"Thank you. We'll just be sitting over there."
Deacon pointed to a few seats away from where the other people were sitting. "We don't have to wait," Shonda said. "I don't want to bother him if he's busy."
"If he's busy, then he won't come out. We can give him 10 minutes or so."
"Okay, if you're sure." They sat down in the vinyl chairs, and Dante grabbed a magazine and began flipping through it. Shonda, however, took the time to scan the ER. She hadn't spent a lot of time in the ER back home, but she had filled in occasionally. This one didn't seem much different. The pace was still hectic, but something about the area felt different than the ER back home. Maybe it was all in her head. Maybe because she was hoping to stay, she was seeing things differently than she normally would. But was that really a bad thing? A few minutes later, a handsome doctor stepped out and headed toward them.
"Deacon, good to see you. To what do I owe this surprise visit?" "Hey, Brody, this is my friend Shonda. She's going to be in Fire Beach for the foreseeable future and is going to need a job. She was a pediatric nurse at her hospital back in Baytown, and I was hoping that you could tell us who to talk to and maybe put in a good word."
Brody's brows lifted, and he chuckled, shaking his head.
"You aren't going to believe this, but I just saw a memo this morning asking for someone to cover pediatrics for a few months. Evidently, one of the nurses there is pregnant and needed to take extra time off due to some complications."
Shonda's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, no. Is she going to be okay? Is the baby?"
"I don't have any information beyond what I told you, but I know she's in good hands. Look, I gotta get back, but go see Diane in Human Resources. Tell her I sent you, and I'll send a recommendation when I'm done here. I can't guarantee anything, but if you're qualified, I know they need the help."
"I am, thank you." Brody nodded, shook Deacon's hand again, and then disappeared back into the bowels of the ER.
"Well, I'd say God is providing," Deacon said, as he led the way toward Human Resources.
"Maybe, but I wish the circumstances were different. I hate the thought of getting hired because some other woman has complications."
Deacon stopped and grabbed her arm. "Hey, that's in God's hands, too."
She looked at him, realizing that he'd changed in one other way, too. This one probably more important than the rest. He'd become much stronger in his faith, and Shonda knew she wanted to stay for even more reasons now. "You're right," she said. "Let's follow God's lead." The HR department here was nothing like the one back home. It wasn't relegated to the basement, and there were enough windows to keep it as well lighted as the rest of the hospital. "Well, I have to tell you, compared to the dungeon back home, this place already feels better," she whispered to Deacon. A woman at the closest desk looked up with a friendly smile and waved them over. "Hello, I'm Diane. What can I do for you?" "My name is Shonda, and I'm a pediatric nurse. I'm actually employed at Baytown Hospital, but had to take a leave of absence for safety reasons." Diane lifted an eyebrow, and Shonda worried she was making a terrible impression. Thankfully, Deacon stepped in. "Hi, Diane. I'm Deacon Jackson with the Fire Beach Fire Department. Shonda witnessed a crime back in Baytown, and someone is after her, so I brought her here. My friend on the force in Baytown suggested she stay out of town for a while, so she's looking for a job here, and Dr. Kavanaugh told us you might be looking for a pediatric nurse." Diane narrowed her eyes at Deacon, clearly trying to decide if she should trust him. "We might be."
"Brody promised to send over a recommendation when he gets off work," Deacon added with his charming smile.
"I'll be sure to look for it then," Diane said. Then she turned her attention to Shonda. "I'm not saying we are, but if there is an open position, how long do you plan to stay in town?" This question caught Shonda slightly off guard. They hadn't really discussed it. "To be honest, I'm not sure, but..." She looked over at Deacon. "There are definitely reasons for me to stay long term." Diane looked from one to the other. "Well, I'll need to look into your background records, but you can fill out an application for me." She pulled a piece of paper out of her drawer, attached it to a clipboard, and handed it to Shonda. Shonda bit the inside of her lip. If Diane spoke with Amy, then she doubted she would get hired. But if she explained the situation, would that make her look crazy? She glanced over at Deacon, but as if reading her mind, he nodded for her to go ahead. "When you call my last job, will you speak to my direct supervisor?" "That's usually the way it's done," Diane said slowly. "Why?" "The crime that I witnessed was evidently committed by someone who doesn't want it to come to light. I reported it to the police, but they told me I must have imagined it. And when I pushed, they forced me to attend therapy sessions. I went because I wanted to keep my job, but something wasn't right about it. I was supposed to be at another session today, and Amy, the HR rep there, told me that I'd be fired if I didn't attend these sessions. I know it sounds crazy and makes me sound unstable, but my boss, Aaron, will be able to back all of this up." "I see. Well, why don't you still fill that out, and we'll see where it goes." Diane didn't appear convinced, but Shonda had to hope that she would still call Aaron and get the whole story. "Thank you." Shonda took the application and sat down in a nearby chair to fill it out. Deacon and Dante sat next to her, and Deacon took charge of entertaining Dante so she could focus, which she greatly appreciated. When she finished filling it out, she returned it to Diane. praying that she would at least consider her.